IVM. We would like to thank HDFC Life Insurance for supporting this show. HDFC Life Insurance has created an online video series called Behind the Journey with some of the most interesting people from the creative and entertainment industry. It explores the stories that are behind the glitz and glamour of the spotlight and screaming fans. Let's listen in now to a snippet from the episode featuring music producer Ritviz.
Financial planning is extremely, extremely important, especially for like a person like me who like to splurge a lot. But I think once you have a goal set in your mind, I think back of your head, you also know that, okay, cool, I need to stop at a certain point and I need to like plan this out, because if you really truly care about what you want to do in 5 years, in 10 years, you will save and you will make sure that that dream becomes a reality.
As you just heard, setting goals is crucial for your finances as well as your career. You can watch all the episodes of Behind the Journey on HDFC Life Insurance's YouTube channel, youtube.com/HDFC Life. Take control of your personal goals with HDFC Life Insurance's financial solutions. Plan now with HDFC Life Insurance.
Terms and conditions apply. HDFC Life Insurance Company Limited, IRDAI registration number 101.
You've tuned into a show called Mr. and Mrs. Binge-Watch and you were expecting a spoiler-free episode. So there are many spoilers on this episode. Kripya dhyan dijiye. Hello there, we're back with a brand new episode of Mr. and Mrs. Binge-Watch. And with us on this episode today are Otis, Eric, Maeve, and all your favorite characters from Sex Education, which is back with a brand new season.
And if you haven't watched Sex Education, you really have to get around to doing that.
I like how I went like, brand new season. And others were like, and if you haven't watched the season. I'm like, arre?
That's like the perfect example of the difference between the two of us.
You mean I'm hyper or sober?
No, just like...
What are you trying to say?
Different energy levels often, and we like complement each other, don't we? Don't you remember all those times where I'm excited to talk about something and all you want to do is fall asleep? It's the same analogy. There's no difference. But yeah, Sex Education is back with a new season. Season 1 aired in January last year. And I remember it, Sex Education, when it arrived last year, it came with very little buzz, so to speak. And very soon turned into this real favorite among a lot of Netflix audiences, and it's among Netflix's few sort of British imports. And I remember being so taken aback by the plot, because Sex Education was essentially about teenagers in a high school in a part of the UK, sort of coming to terms with their sexuality, with the main character being Otis, played by Asa Butterfield, whose mother...
I love his name, Asa Butterfield.
Who's, that's like a sex name right there.
It's like...
whose mother is played by Gillian Anderson, who happens to be a sex therapist. And the first season was really about the fact that Otis, who's this typical cliched kind of a, awkward teenager who really can't seem to either get laid or be popular with his friends apart from his one best friend, starts advising people on all things sex related on campus.
Yeah.
And through the sessions that people have with him, we get introduced to various characters and the kind of problems that, kids might face on campus. And it's really interesting because while they followed so many cliches of the high school format, it's almost like they were trying to use the familiarity to get you into the world of the show and then sort of throw these really, new storylines and concepts at the audience.
Yeah, I feel like season 1 was basically almost after you had established that Otis was like your school sex therapist and his best friend, Eric, and his new friend Maeve are helping him with this business, and sort of, every episode is about some new sex problem that a teenager has, and Otis and gang are sort of, helping that teenager out. Season 2, I'm happy to say, is more about these characters and how their stories have unfolded and what they're going through in life right now.
Yeah.
Yes, there is the sex problems thrown in, but there's so much more on this season. Like, this season is not following any format of like, okay, what kind of sex issue is going to come up in the next episode. In this season, in fact, you're actually delving deep into the sex lives of your main characters as well.
Which is fair because, I think season 1 was meant to be a sampler, a taster, give you an idea of what the show is about. and we didn't know any of the characters then. So we were literally episode after episode. And I remember telling you this, just like on Dear White People, season 1 of which had every episode being named after or being dedicated to one character on the show. And that format worked beautifully for 2 seasons. And then they did away with it in season 3, because by then all your characters were so well established.
Yeah.
And it worked beautifully in season 3, because then they just freed themselves from that entire baggage. Similarly, on Sex Education, I feel they use the first season very intelligently to introduce you to the world of the show, to the various characters, all of that.
The kind of school that, Otis and Eric and Maeve study at, really.
Yeah. And while even this season always begins, almost every episode of the last season began with 2 people in the middle of the act of having sex. And so there are all these very raunchy starts to every episode, which they've retained this season as well. What's different, like what you said, is that start or that aspect does not become the most important part of the episode. It's just, continuing with the format. But at the same time, you're right, they've sketched out their storyline so much better. And I feel
because there's so much more drama going on in each of the characters and their lives in this season. And there's, of course, there's a lot of sex. And I don't mean sex in like it's not meant to titillate at all.
Yeah.
It's meant to be really to educate. Watching this show will educate a lot of people.
And a lot of it is used for humor, and humor in a very nice way. It's not like a sex comedy humor.
Correct.
Like, for example, the first episode begins with Otis furiously masturbating over a period of several days, because and while that might seem like a really cheap kind of a sequence to have, the reason it works is because if you watch season 1, you realize that Otis is basically this kid on the cusp of puberty, and he spends all of season 1 not being able to feel sexually active in any way.
Not being able to masturbate at all, in fact.
And masturbate at all. And season 1 ended with him sort of discovering the joy of masturbation.
And so much so that in season 2...
It just felt right that you begin season 2 with this crazy montage of this 15-year-old boy who's just going bonkers, masturbating at every given opportunity.
Like anything will turn him on.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it goes with the theme of the show, and it's very relatable in a sense as well, right? And I think that's what Sex Education does. It makes a lot of things that are taboo, but at the same time things that we've experienced in our lives but maybe not seen manifest in a storyline on TV, or like something that you openly speak about with your parents or friends.
Yeah, I feel like Sex Education to me has been like, all those strange questions that you maybe now Google and you didn't know who to ask. In this show, Gillian Anderson and Otis's character are those characters that, who answer all of those questions. So whether you're thinking about growth on your body or in your private parts, or you're thinking about, the length of your private parts, or any, sexual positions, or, what is weird, what is freaky.
A lot of it has to do with mental stuff as well. Like, for example, there is one character in the new season who only gets turned on when spoken dirtily to. Or another character who has this need to cover the face of the person she's having sex with, because she believes that she doesn't look appealing, in the process of having sex. And I feel that these are really mental issues rather than physical issues.
Some of them, it also deals with fetishes. It also deals with things like asexuality.
All things sex, basically.
I like the fact that there's a character who, in the midst of all these horny teenagers, finally comes up to Gillian Anderson's character and says that nothing turns me on.
Yeah.
Man, woman, or anything else.
Yeah. And it's nice because, I also like the takeaway of that episode where basically Gillian Anderson, where in fact in another episode a character says that she's not attracted to sex, she's attracted to a person. So these are all various elements that come in, in and out of the storytelling. But what I liked about the new season is also that it really comes together nicely as an ensemble show. Like last year was really mainly about Otis. And we have to speak about Chuti Katwa, who plays Eric, his
Chuti
best
Katwa.
friend.
They all have such cool names on this show. Asa Butterfield, Chuti Katwa.
Yeah, and he was just the best thing about season 1. And he had this amazing arc with his father, who's actually completely been done away with magically in this season, where it was essentially about the fact that while he's a teenager who's out to his parents and to the world at large, it was still about, the father somehow wrapping his head around his son being gay. this was explored extensively in season 1, and there was this beautiful moment in season 1 where the father essentially comes to terms with it, and he acknowledges it, and the father and son have a talk. And I remember it was one of the most moving and heartwarming moments of season 1.
Yeah, where he actually calls his son brave and says,
yeah,
I'm learning
yeah,
from my brave son.
Yeah. So we see that multiplied into 5 in the new season, because every character has such great arcs. And I don't just mean not just Otis and Maeve and Eric and this character called Jackson. It's not just these guys. Everyone, Adam has such a great, arc on this season. He's just such a fascinating character. And that actor is so good because he almost gets no lines. He entirely, sort of communicates through his body language, through his facial expressions. He's such an interesting, and fascinating character.
What I like is that the writers have taken all the characters. Of course, I mean, Eric, Maeve, Otis, they continue to be the main stars of the show along with Gillian Anderson. But they've taken all of the smaller characters also and done full justice to their arcs. I mean, if you saw them in one episode in the last season where they were either a rich, snobby girl or, part of the Mean Girls Club or an underconfident jock. I don't know. They've taken all of those characters and given them actual storylines this season. So along with, Maeve and Otis and Eric's relationships, you also see all of these smaller characters have their own subplots which actually work really well with the larger show.
Yeah, so no character is a cliche basically. Even if a character seems cliched, they manage to give that character enough meat and a backstory, or they manage to make those characters seem very lifelike or very relatable, which is great about the show. And there are so many, for example, this year they deal with sexual assault, for example, which is part of the sex education sort of umbrella. So in the first season, they steered clear of a lot of these dark topics. And frankly, the entire atmosphere of the show and the tone is extremely light. And in fact, it's hilarious because it's got some of the best. The thing that may not have come through in our podcast so far is that it's got some of the best British humor on offer.
Oh yeah, you're going to be laughing through so much of it. I mean, especially the awkward moments. And I mean, I don't know how it just has a really light touch. It never feels too heavy.
But this year they managed to sort of slip in the entire molestation and sexual assault aspect of it, and it's done in an extremely organic way. We live in a time where seeing shows which deal with taboo issues or things that are slightly dark doesn't seem surprising at all, because something like, for example, the sexuality of the characters on the show is never something that has brought too much attention to. Being queer on the show is not a big deal at all, which is something that we've been seeing in a lot of these campus shows, whether it's Dear White People, whether it's this, whether it's Euphoria. It's now reached a point where gender and sexuality is no more a big deal, but sexual assault, and the way it makes its way through in the narrative is also very interestingly done. It's also done through an extremely quirky character who, when she undergoes the sexual assault, is almost in denial and does not even realize what's happened to her. And, it's great because all of that comes together in what I felt was the wow moment of the show, which happened in episode 7, where a bunch of these characters who are not necessarily
friends,
main characters, and at the same time they all come from very different places and they're all different from each other and aren't really friends. They come together and, they have a heart-to-heart talk, and they're all basically girls who don't really get along with each other, but they realize that the one thing that ties them together is the fact that each of them have faced sexual assault in some form or the other. It needn't be as, it's not as drastic for each of them, but in minor or major situations, they've had to deal with it. And that episode just ends on such a high with the use of music, and there's just such a great sequence at the end of that episode.
Actually, what I like about the sexual assault episode, or the way they've tackled it in this season, is that they've actually not chosen something that's, on the larger scale of what constitutes sexual assault, they've not chosen something that's very, very big. It's something, let me explain what I mean. In the sense, it's something that I think almost every Indian girl who's traveled by bus, especially in a city, whichever city you live in, where you see a man openly masturbating or rubbing himself against you and then coming all over you, right? Now, in the larger picture of what constitutes sexual assault and rape, this is not as grave an issue as, say, rape or, actual penetration of any kind without your permission. But even that and the kind of impact it has on this girl's psyche, where she's not able to take the bus after this incident happens with her,
or get physical with her boyfriend.
I mean, it just tells you the kind of, like, they're basically, the makers, I feel like, are trying to tell you that, you don't need a major sexual assault incident to have happened with you for you to be a certain way. Sometimes it's even the small things, being inappropriately touched, or, in this case, a man jizzing all over you without your permission and without your knowledge, actually. I mean, I like the fact that they could have taken something, because, in teenage years, rape and very grave sexual assault is also very common, but they've actually taken something that's very considered, very normal, and wherever in the world you live, these kind of incidents are brushed off.
Yeah, but I think that has a dual advantage to it. One is what you said. One is that they are then able to essentially bring focus to the fact that sexual assault is sexual assault, and there's nothing like small sexual assault or major sexual assault. But apart from that, I also feel it goes with the light sort of tone of the show, because I mean, if they take on something as drastic as rape, for example, I think it would somewhere change the fabric of the show itself, right?
Though because I feel like, now
I mean, broadly, it's a comedy if you think about it.
Yeah, but I'm saying now, for example, in future episodes or future seasons, if they want to deal with slightly more morbid or darker themes, I feel like they could go there.
But also, you've seen that on shows like 13 Reasons Why and on Euphoria. Course. So, I mean, it's not something that you don't see on campus shows. I think sex education's USP is the fact that, and I realized all the more during this season, and I absolutely loved this season so much more than season 1. I feel that all 8 episodes just knocked it out of the park, one after the other, because I found myself laughing through so much of it, because while it is funny as hell, it still manages to pack in such great characters and good story, which is a really tough balancing act, because a lot of comedies just provide great laughs and don't really end up, giving you more than just humor. And a lot of other shows that have great storylines and characters might, sort of lack wit.
Yeah.
And I think it's a real, complete hats off to Laurie Nunn, who's the creator and the main lead writer of the show, to be able to combine humor with serious issues, with great storylines. I'm so invested in Otis and Maeve's love story. I'm so invested also in the relationship Otis has with his mother, played by the fabulous Gillian Anderson.
And I love the fact that they found a way to bring Gillian Anderson into the main conversation. I mean, in season 1, let's be honest, I mean, Gillian Anderson almost has like an extended special appearance in every episode.
Yeah.
Because she's just there for either to give advice or for some of those very strange moments that happen in Otis's life. In season 2, she has her own storyline, because now she's been brought on by the school management to actually come and help the school, the students with their sex education.
Yeah.
And her entire, the kind of themes and the kind of, questions that the students are asking her are exactly what I would believe, like a lot of our Indian schools also, a lot of kids would be thinking the same things, right?
Yeah, I think the difference is that in season 1, Gillian Anderson basically played the mother.
Yeah.
That typical, so in a high school show, you essentially focus on the kids, and then there are the characters played by parents. The parents played by actors who are just essentially supporting actors. And I remember watching Gillian Anderson in season 1 made us really excited, because it's so refreshing to see her after having played an investigating officer on X-Files and then The Fall, and play such, sort of deal with slightly darkish themes on so many of the shows that she's
she
been
was
a part
downright, the shows that she's been part of are all downright, they're either thriller or morbid.
Yeah, so to see her on a comedy like that, in a chilled role, just having fun, felt so good in season 1. But here what they've done is they've really made her come to the center of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, apart from her being made part of the campus storyline, she has her own romantic track unfolding as well.
Jacob.
And I think another thing that I felt was that it's like they're writing every track like it was a movie in itself. Like her whole track with her son, Like the entire Asa Butterfield and Gillian Anderson track could easily be turned into a 90-minute film. It's essentially about a son dealing with the absence of a father, but always bringing it out on his mother, and the mother who's always tried to, play two roles for him, and realizing that she always is at a disadvantage as a result of it. And how they come to terms with that on the show is beautiful, and it has a beautiful arc. Similarly with the Otis and Maeve love story. So a lot of similarly with another track of a character called Jackson, who essentially is this athlete who's
been brought up by two moms. One of whom is his biological mother, and the other one who is his stepmom.
And he basically ends up realizing that he does not want to be a sports person, and he gets inspired to sort of take on the arts by another sort of student on campus who's completely they're like complete chalk and cheese. But then their friendship turns into it could easily be a rom-com, sort of a setup in a film if it was a story by itself. So I feel like Sex Education has many storylines which deserve to be film stories in themselves, and it's great that they are able to blend them all together in one show.
For example, in season 1, Eric, struggled with his feelings for Adam, who was this typical jock headmaster's son and had bullied him throughout his life.
Yeah.
But as they're both sort of growing into their sexuality and realizing that they might have feelings for each other, but also struggling with the bullying. And in season 2, Eric has another beautiful romantic track. Everything he's ever wanted in a boyfriend, whether the looks, the understanding, the sensitivity, everything's there, and yet he's sort of finding himself conflicted because Adam makes his way back into his life. That's another great story over there.
Yeah,
the way Adam eventually sort of comes to him and professes his love is such a great... That's one of my favorite entire episodes of, the entire musical production of Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
Directed by, of course, who in season 1 you see this character called Lily, who you've known is, to put it, she's just strange.
Yeah.
She's just one of those strange characters who dreams of having sex with, mythical characters or characters in space, and she's constantly drawing out these graphic novels, sex graphic novels actually, and then she actually gets to direct a modern adaptation of Romeo and Juliet for the school, which, as it turns out, everything is symbolic of sex.
Yeah.
So everything...
Yeah, it's a really raunchy show.
It's a really raunchy musical production.
Yeah, so I think my wow moment, as I told you, was at the end of episode 7. One of the best episodes I have seen all year, and not just on the show. So the entire episode actually was episode 7, season 2 of Sex Education. The whole episode was a wow moment for me. Do you have a wow moment as well?
I think for me also, I agree with you. The wow moment was all those girls ganging up together and saying... Actually, you hoped that they would say, let's teach this sex pervert a lesson. But instead, what they do is they hold their friend's hand and get on the bus together so that she can finally...
That was amazing.
She can finally overcome this sort of psychological issue she's dealing with ever since a man jizzed on her in a bus. So definitely, wow moment we agree on. Who's your scene stealer for the season?
Look, my scene stealer is the same as last year. It's Eric. Because Eric, this season I would probably say it was Gillian Anderson. But because... Well, I didn't record this podcast last year when Sex Education came out, and we all just discovered Chuti Katwa and thought that he's such a great actor, such a great find.
Yeah.
And he was excellent in season 1. He was a find of the year for me in a sense. So he still continues to be the scene stealer as far as I'm concerned.
All right, my scene stealer is this actor called, and I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Her name's Chinenye Iziudu. I'm quite sure I'm f***ing up her name really badly. But she plays a character called Viv on the show. She's Jackson's tutor, and she's this nerdy kid. But I love the relationship she develops with Jackson, and I love the scenes she has with him. For me, she was a scene stealer. Apart from the principal cast, she really stood out.
On the Binge-o-meter, I would say that Sex Education, because it's a show about sex, is a lollipop. I couldn't think of any other reference
Basically, we
right
loved
now.
it, yeah, guys. If it ranks a good maybe 8.5 or 9 on 10 on our sexometer. Binge-o-meter.
Sexometer is a good one though for this week. And Sex Education, 2 whole seasons are out on Netflix. Season 1 was great, and season 2 is even better. In fact, the moment season 2 ended, I wish season 3 was here. So I literally, and just yesterday Netflix greenlit season 3.
Yay!
So that's going to be here in Jan 2021. But till then, you should totally go on to Netflix and you should check out both seasons of Sex Education.
If you like this podcast, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can listen to us on the IVM Podcast app or on ivmpodcast.com. You can also follow us on our social media handles. I'm at JaniceSec85 on Instagram and Twitter. Aniruddha is at Ani Guha on Instagram and Twitter. And IVM is at IVM Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. We'll see you next week with lots more entertaining content from the world of television, Netflix, Amazon, and wherever else you watch all your shows.
Toodles.
I hope you enjoyed that show. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, HDFC Life and Paytm Money. And let me tell you a couple of things that you should check out this week. On Litnama, Lakshmi talks to Hardik Waghela and Mohammad Muneem from the band The Words of Alif. They talk about how the band came to be and more. On Football the guys talk about Liverpool qualifying for the Champions League, City getting banned from it, and Arsenal thrashing Newcastle for a 4-0 win. On Golgappa, tune into a Laugh Riot episode where host Tripti talks to Karan and Neil from Bhadipa. On our Kannada podcast Thale Harate, Ramya Bhaskar and Sridhar Pabisetti talk to Ganesh and Pawan about reimagining school education for Industry 4.0. On Tapri Tales, Madhuri tells a tale of her struggle with keeping cockroaches away from the kitchen while wondering why there are no cockroaches in her mother's kitchen. On Beyond Cliché, Almas is joined by the Mahi Way actor Pushti Shakti to talk about beauty beyond size. Thanks and keep listening.
Filter coffee is a fascinating beverage. You need to pick the right beans, blend them in the right proportion, roast them to perfection, and slow brew at the right temperature to get the perfect cup. Which is exactly like great conversations as well. You need to track down the most interesting minds, get them into their zone, and settle down for an unhurried, unscripted chat. And coffee for me is always, always, always best enjoyed with friends. I'm Karthik Nagarajan, and do share my table as I meet some of the most interesting people I know and sit them down for a strong cup of coffee and an even stronger conversation. Join me every Wednesday for a freshly brewed episode. This is not frappe. This is the Filter Coffee Podcast.